Get this broken woman out of my ballroom. Benjamin's voice cracked across the marble, sharp and final. I built the code your machine runs on. You're a data clerk in a wheelchair, not an engineer. Roll yourself out the door. The locket in my hand says otherwise. He laughed, the sound bouncing hard off the chandeliers above. Trash belongs outside. Drag her out now. Security closed in, boots scraping gravel grit across the marble floor. Emily didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice an inch. She reached into her cardigan and pulled out a battered silver locket, clicking it open, slow. 500 investors froze glasses halfway to their mouths, dead silent. Benjamin's smile cracked at the edges as the exoskeleton on stage suddenly...
Wrong move. He just humiliated the neural engineer who built his empire. Let's get into it.
3 weeks before the gala, the basement of Vanguard Medical smelled of old paper and forgotten things. It smelled of dust, of mildew, of years compressed into filing cabinets. Emily sat at her workstation, quiet, steady, invisible. The fluorescent light above her flickered. It had flickered for 6 months. No one had fixed it. She was reviewing intake logs. She was cross-referencing patient codes. She was doing exactly what they paid her to do, which was very little, which was exactly what they thought she was worth. The battered silver locket around her neck caught the stuttering light. She tucked it beneath her cardigan. Old habit, older reflex. The elevator at the end of the corridor opened. New shoes came first. $2,000 Italian leather loafers, sharp-toed immaculate, stepping onto the cracked concrete floor of the basement archive like the concrete should feel ashamed of itself. Emily heard them before she saw them. The sound was deliberate, unhurried, certain of its welcome. She did not turn around. This is the archive level. The voice was smooth-bored, faintly disgusted. Yes, Mr. Hartwell. Ashley's voice tight and bright, the voice of someone maintaining composure under pressure. Full digitization team records going back 20 years. Benjamin Hartwell walked the length of the room. He walked it slowly, the way men walk spaces they have already decided to repurpose. His cologne arrived before he did. Sharp bergamot, expensive and aggressive, cutting through the stale air like a blade. Emily recognized it. She had once associated that scent with something else entirely. Now it sat in her lungs like a warning. He stopped. She felt him stop. She did not need to see it. Emily. Not a greeting, a naming. The way you name something you find where you did not expect to find it. Something inconvenient, something that requires a decision. She turned her chair slowly. The scuffed rubber wheels left faint tracks on the dusty floor. She looked at him. He looked at her. 15 years collapsed into approximately 4 seconds of mutual recognition. And then his expression did what she had always known it would do if this moment ever came. It did not soften. It hardened smooth and instantaneous the way a man's face hardens when sentiment becomes inconvenient. You work here. He said it flatly, stated final, a declaration rather than a question. I do, Emily said. Benjamin adjusted his Rolex. The gesture was reflexive, automatic, a man recalibrating after a small disruption. The gold face caught the flickering light. It was heavy. Everything about him was heavy-weighted, expensive, a man constructed entirely from things that cost money. He looked at her cardigan, faded blue, washed too many times. He looked at her chair, the manual model, scratched armrests, cracked grip tape on the left push rim. He looked at all of it, and his face completed its calculation. Ashley. He did not look away from Emily when he said it. When did we acquire this facility? Closing was finalized this morning, sir. Right. He tilted his head very slightly. So everything in this building is now a Hartwell Group asset. Everything. He paused. Or a liability. Emily said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap, still composed, entirely controlled. I'm restructuring the archive division, Benjamin said. He addressed this to the middle distance, not to her. Fully automated. No human staff. He glanced at Ashley. Process the terminations by end of business today, all of them.
Ashley's pen stopped moving on her clipboard. She recovered quickly. Of course.
I'll prepare the standard severance packages for review. No severance. His tone was pleasant conversational, the tone of a man ordering a second espresso. Probationary acquisition clause, new ownership, new contracts. No one here has been on Hartwell payroll for more than 6 hours. He finally looked directly at Emily again. You understand how corporate acquisitions work.
He said it the way you explain something to someone you assume cannot follow.
Emily's hands remained folded, the locket pressed against her sternum, small and cold and certain.
She thought of the micro SD card nested inside it.
She thought of 15 years of encrypted code of the neural link architecture she had built from nothing, of the algorithm she had designed to save herself before the crash had made saving herself personal. She thought of all the things she had not said yet. She said none of them. Clear out your workstation, Benjamin said. He was already turning away. The loafers pivoted on the concrete. Ashley will arrange for security to assist.
I don't need assistance, Emily said quietly.
He paused. He did not turn back. He almost left it there. Then he turned back slowly, and what crossed his face was not malice exactly. It was something worse. It was amusement. Get her a box, he said to no one in particular, and get someone to help her with the door, the service door. He glanced around the basement, the stacks of folders, the old terminal screens, the entire underground world she had inhabited for 5 years. Trash belongs outside. The security guard, broad and expressionless, moved toward her chair. His hand found the push handle at the back. Emily gripped both push rims, not to resist, not to fight. She gripped them the way you grip something you have carried for a long time, something that belongs to you, something no one else has the right to touch. I'll manage myself, she said. The guard looked at Benjamin. Benjamin waved a hand. A dismissal, a conclusion. The hand of a man who had already moved on to the next item on his agenda. The bergamot cologne thickened as he passed close aggressively, close the expensive leather of his shoes pausing inches from the cracked rubber of her wheels. A $2,000 loafer, a worn-out wheel. The distance between them was exactly as large as he believed it to be. He walked to the elevator. Ashley followed her heels, precise and miserable on the concrete. The elevator opened. It closed. The fluorescent light flickered. Emily sat alone in the basement of the building that had been hers that morning and belonged to Benjamin Hartwell that afternoon. She sat still quiet, her hands on her wheels. The locket was warm now against her skin. Old habit, that warmth. Older comfort. She did not cry. She did not yell. She began to pack her workstation methodically, folder by folder, drive by drive, the small, careful movements of a woman who knows exactly what she is carrying and exactly why none of it fits in a box. The service door was heavy. She opened it herself. Outside, the afternoon light was cold and flat. She sat in it for a moment. She breathed. Above her on the 4th floor of the building, through the glass wall of the newly acquired executive suite, she could see the faint glow of Benjamin's phone screen as he scrolled already past her, already somewhere else entirely. She reached into her cardigan. Her thumb found the locket. She pressed it once gently, the way you press something you are not yet ready to open. She had not lost her job today. She had lost the last reason to stay quiet. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator. It had never been a problem before the crash. Now it was simply the condition of her life, one of many, the way a stone in a shoe becomes the shoe eventually. Emily had learned the route, 12 steps to the landing pivot, 7 more. The door that stuck in rain. Tonight it rained. She got inside. The television was old. The screen had a crack running diagonally from the upper left corner, sealed with 2 strips of duct tape that had yellowed over time. She had not replaced it. Replacement cost money. Money had been the job was gone. She turned it on. She was not looking for anything specific. She was looking for the particular kind of noise that keeps a room from feeling like a container. She found the news. She almost changed the channel. Then she saw the laboratory. Pristine, white, enormous, the kind of space that exists to communicate expense. The camera swept it slowly, lovingly, the way cameras move through spaces funded by people who want you to understand what funding looks like. Technicians in cleanroom suits, equipment that gleamed. And at the center of the frame, standing at a podium of pale brushed steel, Benjamin Hartwell smiled for the cameras in a way he had never smiled at her. The Genesis Exoskeleton, he said, represents the single most significant leap in neural interface medicine in the last 2 decades. Emily's hand stopped moving toward the remote. The broadcast cut to footage. The machine filled the screen. Titanium and carbon fiber articulated joints, a full-body frame built to walk for people who could not. It was beautiful. It was precisely engineered. It moved in the footage with a fluidity that most machines did not achieve, that most engineers spent careers chasing without finding. Emily had found it once. She had been 26 years old, working from a rented studio apartment on a salvaged laptop, building something she intended to use herself after the accident she did not yet know was coming. Her paralyzed legs did not move. They never moved. But something in her chest did. She leaned forward in her chair. The cracked screen threw blue light across her face, sharp and cold. The glossy laboratory on the other side of it, enormous and immaculate. She watched the exoskeleton's left knee articulate through a 45-degree flex. She watched the ankle joint compensate, micro-adjust, self-correct in real time. She watched the biometric sync indicator in the lower corner of the demonstration screen cycle through its handshake sequence. Green, amber, green, locked. The sequence was 7 steps. She had designed those 7 steps. She had named them internally, privately, with the kind of names you give things you build alone at 2 a.m. when no one is watching. Step 4, she had called the mirror check. It looked for the user's own neural signature before completing the sync, a security measure, a way of ensuring the machine recognized its operator as specifically, individually, irreplaceably human. Benjamin had named it the Genesis Protocol. He had given it a press release. Emily sat very still. The phantom sensation arrived the way it always did, without warning, without permission. A burning, insistent ghost feeling in legs that felt nothing. It happened sometimes when she was close to something that mattered. She had learned not to trust it as signal. She trusted it now. The Genesis suit, Benjamin continued at his podium, is 100% wireless. It connects to any local, unsecured network for cloud processing, making it deployable anywhere in the world without proprietary hardware dependency. He smiled again, measured, deliberate, the smile of a man reading from a script he is very confident about. We built it for accessibility. We built it for freedom. Emily's jaw tightened. Once. She released it. He had not built it. She knew what he had built in his 20s. She had watched him build it. It was a portfolio, a network, a reputation constructed from the work of people he had acquired and absorbed and moved past. He was extraordinarily skilled at acquisition. He was extraordinarily skilled at standing at podiums above other people's labor and calling it his own name. But this was different. This was not an underpaid engineer whose contract had signed over IP. This was code written before the crash code that lived on a personal drive code that had never touched a Hartwell server code that had no contract attached to it because she had written it for herself in secret in the months before a car accident had made it personally necessary and then taken her ability to use it. She thought about the timeline. She thought about it carefully, clinically, the way she thought about problems she intended to solve. The crash was 15 years ago. The coma was 8 weeks. When she woke, the drive was gone. She had assumed it lost in the accident. She had grieved it the way you grieve things that cannot be recovered and rebuilt from memory imperfectly, painfully over years. She had rebuilt her life instead, smaller, quieter, underground. She looked at the machine on her cracked screen. She looked at the mirror check cycling on the demonstration display behind Benjamin's shoulder, green, amber, green. Not rebuilt, stolen. He had not just abandoned her in that hospital. He had taken what was in her apartment while she was unconscious. He had taken the drive. He had taken 15 years to build the infrastructure to use it. and now he was standing at a podium calling it the single most significant leap in 2 decades. And the camera was applauding, and the investors were applauding, and the world was applauding. A man who had reached into the life of a woman in a coma and taken the most valuable thing she had ever made. Emily turned the television off. The room was quiet, small, hers. The rain hit the window in irregular patterns. She sat in the dark for a long time. She was not panicking. She was not crying. She was doing something much more precise and much more dangerous. She was remembering exactly how the code worked. She knew every line. She knew every vulnerability. She knew the machine better than the man who had stolen it because she had built it to know her, and that was something Benjamin Hartwell, for all his podiums and all his press releases, did not yet understand. She knew exactly how it listened. She just needed it to listen one more time. The gala setup began at 6 in the morning. Emily was in the service entrance by 6:45. She had her old badge. Deactivated, technically canceled in the system the same afternoon Benjamin's loafers had crossed the basement floor. But the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom used a legacy reader on the service entrance, the kind that checked magnetic strip rather than networked authentication, and legacy readers did not know about same-day terminations. She had known this for 3 years. She had filed a facilities report about it twice. No one had fixed it. The door opened. She went in. The catering staff moved through the ballroom in organized streams, efficient and unseeing the particular invisibility of people focused entirely on their own tasks. Emily moved with them. Faded cardigans, scuffed wheels, a woman who looked like she belonged to the background. She had spent 5 years perfecting that particular quality of presence. It was not humility, it was strategy. The ballroom was transforming. Overnight crews had hung the chandeliers, enormous, blinding, 1,000 points of cold light suspended above marble floors that had been polished to mirror clarity. Round tables were being dressed in white linen. At the far end of the room, elevated on a stage built for exactly this purpose, the Genesis Exoskeleton stood on its display, Mount Titanium and immaculate, catching the chandelier light and holding it. Emily did not look at it for long. She could not afford to look at it for long. She moved toward the service corridor on the east side, the one that connected to the building's secondary server room. She knew the layout. The Metropolitan Grand was a Vanguard medical partner venue, had been for years, and Vanguard's archive system had an administrative node here for remote backup. She had used it twice during late-stage audits. She knew the password as of 8 months ago, and she knew that the Metropolitan Grand IT department updated credentials on a quarterly cycle, and the last cycle had been 11 weeks ago. 1 week. She had 1 week of margin, possibly none. The server room was small, climate-controlled humming. She parked beside the terminal and opened her laptop. The fan kicked on immediately, working hard, the heat of it pressing through the thin fabric of her pants, almost burning. She had been running the decryption scaffold in the background for 36 hours, and it had not stopped running since. Old hardware, old fan, the kind of heat that meant the machine was giving everything it had. She needed the original upload timestamps. Specifically, she needed the server-side logs showing when the neural link architecture files had first entered a Vanguard system, because those logs, if they predated the crash, would establish provenance. They would establish that the code existed before any Hartwell acquisition, before any corporate claim, before any press release calling it a Genesis protocol. Timestamps were not arguments. Timestamps were facts. She found the administrative backdoor she had used during the audits. She entered the credentials. The system considered her for 4 seconds. Access denied. She tried the secondary pathway, the one built into the legacy archive module. Denied. She tried the maintenance override she had discovered accidentally during a late-night audit 18 months ago, the one she had also filed a report about, the one that had also not been fixed. Denied. Firewall. New, layered, expensive, installed recently. She could see the architecture of it from the outside, the way you can see the shape of a wall from the shadow it throws. Benjamin had brought in a security team. Of course he had. A $500 million IPO required serious infrastructure protection, and serious infrastructure protection meant that every back door she had known about was sealed. She sat back. The laptop fan pushed heat against her legs. She breathed. She was not panicked. Panic was a resource expenditure with no return. She was recalculating. The timestamps were inside the firewall. She could not reach them from here. She needed another path, a physical one, something that bypassed the network entirely. She needed to be on the stage. She needed to be inside the machine. She began scanning the room's network architecture instead, the public-facing layer, the part that existed to manage the event rather than protect the data. The ballroom's AV system ran on a separate subnet, lightly secured, designed for ease of use by event technicians who were not security professionals. She found the subnet in 40 seconds. She mapped it in 4 minutes. The stage presentation was running through a primary AV controller, a mid-range unit mounted in the tech booth on the left side of the stage. Standard setup. Wireless remote for the presenter connected through a proprietary micro receiver. She pulled up the receiver's specification sheet from the manufacturer's public database. She read the hardware notes. She read them twice. The AV remote used for the stage presentation had an open, unsecured micro SD slot, a legacy input from an older model that had never been disabled in the current firmware. The slot accepted external media. The slot critically had direct write access to the primary stage display controller. She closed the specification sheet. She looked at the machine on the stage, enormous, and still its titanium shell throwing light in every direction. She looked at the locket at her throat. She thought about the micro SD card nested inside it, the master key, 15 years old, fully encrypted the original neural signature it contained. The machine was looking for its operator. It had been looking for its operator since the moment it was built, because she had built it that way, because she had designed the mirror check to be patient, permanent, and specific. It would recognize her. It had always been designed to recognize her. She just needed 30 seconds with that remote. A sound from the doorway. Emily closed her laptop in a single motion, smooth and immediate. Ashley stood in the corridor entrance with a tablet and a distracted expression, scanning something on the screen. Her gaze swept the server room. Emily sat completely still. A woman in a faded cardigan beside a humming server rack. Unremarkable background, the kind of person who had always been there and therefore registered as part of the furniture. Ashley's gaze moved on. She made a note on her tablet and walked away, her heels precise and unhurried on the marble. Emily exhaled once. She opened her laptop again. The fan resumed its urgent burning work. She could not reach his servers from the outside. She had already known that. She had known it before she came because she had not come here for the servers. She had come to confirm the path that did not require them. She had confirmed it.
Absolutely not. He stole her life's work while she was in a coma and built a $500 million empire on her tragedy. If that were me, I would have burned the entire ballroom to the ground. Imagine watching the man who abandoned you get rich off the very mind he threw away like garbage. The audacity is real.
The gala opened at 7. By 7:15, the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom held 500 people, and every one of them had been selected for their net worth, their influence, or their proximity to both. The chandeliers burned above them, brilliant and indifferent. Champagne moved through the room on silver trays. The string quartet in the east corner played something precise and elegant, the kind of music that exists to fill silence without demanding attention. Emily came through the side corridor at 7:20. She had stayed in the building. There had been no reason to leave, and every reason not to. She had spent the intervening hours in the service corridor, her laptop open, the fan running, waiting. Patience was not something she had been born with. It was something the years had built into her layer by layer, the way sediment builds, the way stone builds slowly and under pressure. She needed Benjamin alone, just briefly, just long enough. She found him in the hallway off the main entrance, the one that connected the ballroom to the private reception suite. He was on his phone, one hand in his tuxedo pocket, the Rolex catching the hall light in a slow gold pulse. He was laughing at something on the other end. A real laugh. the laugh of a man whose evening was going exactly as planned. She rolled into the hallway. She stopped 6 feet from him. He saw her. His laugh finished itself before his expression changed because men like Benjamin Hartwell had very good reflexes about not showing surprise. He lowered the phone. He looked at her with something that had no warmth in it and no uncertainty either. "You're trespassing," he said, conversational, pleasant. "I need 2 minutes," Emily said. "You need to leave." He glanced toward the ballroom entrance, calculating quick the glance of a man identifying his resources. "The Genesis protocol," Emily said. "The mirror check. The 7-step biometric handshake." She kept her voice level, quiet, precisely calibrated. "I designed that sequence. I need you to acknowledge it. Privately here, just to me." Something moved across his face. Fast, controlled, gone. He smiled instead. "That's a fascinating story," Benjamin said. "It's a documented fact." "Documented by whom?" He tilted his head. The Rolex caught the light again. "A terminated data clerk with no IP filings, no employment contract covering that period, and no legal standing in any jurisdiction I'm aware of." He took 1 step toward her, easy, unhurried. "You wrote some code, Emily. Years ago, hobbyist work. The Genesis protocol is the product of a 7-year development program involving 43 engineers and $250 million in R&D investment. The base architecture predates your R&D program by 8 years, she said. The original files have timestamps. Show me. I will, she said, tonight. He looked at her for a long moment. The string quartet in the ballroom shifted to something slower. The sound moved through the walls, muffled, elegant, violently at odds with the quality of the silence between them. "Let me be very clear," Benjamin said. His voice dropped. Pleasant, still precise, the voice he used when pleasantness was a form of pressure. "You have no proof. You have no platform. You have no resources to pursue this through any legal channel that would survive first contact with my legal team." And he paused. "And if you attempt to disrupt this event, I will have you arrested for corporate espionage before you reach the stage. Federal charges, the kind that follow a person." Another pause, deliberate, waited. "The kind that are very difficult to manage without savings, without employment, without health insurance." He looked at her chair, at her cardigan, at all the visible evidence of her material circumstances. "No one will believe a crippled data clerk over a billionaire. That is not cruelty. That is just how the world is organized." Emily said nothing. He waited. Men like Benjamin waited at moments like this because silence from an opponent usually meant the opponent was breaking. He had seen it many times. He recognized the shape of it. This was not that shape. "Who is the federal auditor in the front row?" Emily said. Not a question. Level quiet. Something shifted in his eyes. Micro-movement, rapid, controlled. "Dr. Sullivan is a guest. He's FDA and SEC cross-certified," Emily said. "I looked him up this afternoon. He's been embedded with 3 IPO investigations in the last 4 years. 2 of them resulted in criminal referrals." She held his gaze. "He is not here as a guest." Benjamin's jaw moved once. "You have 30 seconds to leave this hallway." "You just admitted the theft," Emily said quietly. "Not to me, to yourself. I watched you do it." He stepped back. He reached into his jacket. He pressed 2 fingers to his ear, the gesture of a man with an earpiece, a man with resources immediately available, and said very quietly 2 words. Security came from both ends of the hallway. 2 of them broad earpieces, gleaming tactical and certain. They moved efficiently. One positioned behind her chair, the other stood at an angle that made retreat back toward the service corridor geometrically unlikely. The push handle of her chair, a hand on it, not rough, just present, just definitive. Her wheels scraped backward on the marble, a harsh, discordant sound against the elegant string music bleeding through the walls. Her hands gripped the push rims. The scrape of rubber on polished stone was intimate and ugly, the sound of resistance meeting force of something being moved that did not wish to be moved. Benjamin adjusted his tuxedo jacket. He did not watch. He was already turning back toward the ballroom, back toward his 500 guests, back toward the podium and the stage and the machine that wore her architecture like a stolen coat. Ashley stood at the ballroom entrance. She had been there long enough. Her tablet was in her hands and her face was very still, the stillness of someone absorbing something they will not easily unsee. The coatroom door was heavy. It was dark inside. The lock engaged from the outside with a sound that was small and absolute. Emily sat in the dark, surrounded by the pressing weight of expensive coats, mink and cashmere and wool that cost more than her monthly rent. And she thought about how far she had come and how close she was, and how those two facts existed simultaneously without canceling each other out. She reached into her cardigan pocket. Her fingers found the locket. She did not open it yet. Not yet. But her expression in the absolute dark, where no one could see it, had already changed. The dark was total, not dim, not the comfortable near dark of a room with light under the door. Total pressing, the kind of dark that has texture. Emily sat in it and let it be what it was. The coats pressed in from three sides. Mink cashmere structured wool garments that cost individually more than she made in a month, hanging dense and suffocating the smell of them. A compound of cedar and perfume, and the particular scent of wealth kept in storage. They pressed against her face when she shifted. She stopped shifting. Her wheelchair was jammed at an angle, the left wheel caught against the baseboard. The right wheel a few inches short of a coat rack that she had identified by collision in the first 30 seconds. The space was not designed for her. Very few spaces were. She had spent 15 years learning to exist in spaces that had not considered her, and she was very good at it, and it did not make it less exhausting. She tried the door. She had tried it immediately twice, systematic. The latch had engaged fully. It held. Outside, muffled through 2 inches of door and a corridor and a wall of ballroom noise, the string quartet played on. Emily sat in the dark and breathed. She thought about the arc of the evening. She thought about the federal auditor in the front row, with his eyes that missed nothing, the biometric display that would run on the 50-foot screen behind Benjamin's head when the demonstration began, the AV remote on the tech booth at stage left. She thought about the window of time she had, which was narrowing, which was perhaps already closed. She thought about what happened if it closed entirely. No job, no income, no health insurance for the medications that kept the nerve damage manageable, no legal resources, no platform, no one in that ballroom who knew her name for the right reasons. She thought about what Benjamin had said in the hallway. She thought about it without flinching, which took effort, which she did not allow herself to show even alone in the dark, because there was a version of him that was correct. There was a version of this situation in which the world was organized exactly as he had described it, in which the crippled data clerk remained invisible, and the billionaire remained untouchable, in which the code she had written at 26 stayed buried inside a machine that wore her name on nothing. She had spent 15 years in that version of the world. She knew its dimensions precisely. She knew where the ceilings were, where the walls were, where the doors did not open. She had filed reports about the doors. No one had fixed them. The society that built this coatroom had built it without her in mind. The society that built the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom, the Hartwell Group's acquisition model, the legal infrastructure that protected IP theft when the thief had sufficient resources, the healthcare system that made her employment non-negotiable, the accessibility failures she navigated daily, the 15 years of careful invisibility she had performed to simply remain employed in a basement where no one would look too closely at the woman in the chair. All of it was a system. All of it was in its aggregate a set of decisions made by people who had not considered her, who had built the world for someone else and who would continue building it for someone else, regardless of whether she sat in this coatroom until morning. She knew this. She had always known this. The knowing was not new. What was new was that she had built something inside that system. Quietly alone at 26 years old, she had built something that the system did not know about, had not considered, had not designed a wall to contain. She had built it for herself. She had built it because no one else was going to build it for her. and because she had understood even then, before the crash, before the coma, before 15 years of basement archives and flickering fluorescent lights, that the only architecture worth building was the kind that could not be taken from you. He had taken it. He had tried. But you cannot take a thing from a mind that still holds it. You can take the drive, you can take the years, you can lock the door and press the mink coats against a woman's face in the dark and call it a conclusion. It was not a conclusion. Emily reached into her cardigan pocket. Her thumb found the locket warm now from her body heat. She held it for a moment, just held it, the familiar weight of it, the worn silver edges she had touched 10,000 times. Old habit, oldest comfort. She clicked it open. No photograph inside. There had never been a photograph inside. The locket held a micro SD card, matte black, smaller than her thumbnail, seated in the velvet recess where a picture might have been. 15 years old, fully encrypted. The original neural master key, the base architecture, the mirror check, the 7-step handshake, her biometric signature embedded in the root file as author timestamp origin. Her thumb pressed the edge of the card. The metal was cold and precise, a sharp, small edge biting into the pad of her thumb, and she held the pressure because it was real, and because it was hers, and because it told her exactly where she was, not broken, not concluded, interrupted. She gripped the card carefully, deliberately. She looked at the door invisible in the dark, which she could not see but knew precisely, because she knew the dimensions of every space that had tried to contain her. The coatroom had a faulty latch. Ashley had mentioned it that morning to a maintenance worker in the East Corridor, passing complaint unlogged, unfixed. Emily had heard it. Emily had noted it. Emily had noted everything always. The reports no one read, the doors no one fixed, the vulnerabilities that accumulated in systems built without sufficient care. Her expression in the dark shifted. Not hope exactly. Colder than hope. Quieter. The expression of a woman who has stopped waiting to be let out and started considering the door. She couldn't walk away from this. She had never been able to walk away from anything. That was about to become someone else's problem. The latch gave on the third attempt, not forced, not broken, simply persuaded, a faulty mechanism meeting consistent calibrated pressure, the door swinging inward with a sound that was smaller than it should have been for something that mattered as much as it did. Emily held the edge of the frame for 1 second. She breathed. She rolled forward. The corridor was empty. From inside the ballroom, Benjamin's voice carried through the closed double doors. Amplified, smooth, the voice of a man at a podium who had spent considerable money ensuring that 500 people found him credible. She could not make out the words yet. She could make out the cadence, confident, building, the cadence of a man approaching his moment. She moved. The service corridor ran parallel to the main hall and connected to the stage left wing through a fire door that the catering staff had propped open with a rubber wedge at 6 that morning, and in the particular way of propped fire doors at large events had remained open since. She went through it. The backstage wing was dim, purposeful, full of the organized equipment of a large-scale production. Cable runs, monitor stacks. The tech booth was on her left, a folding table, 2 screens, a soundboard, and the AV controller unit she had mapped from the server room that morning. The technician was watching the main screen. He was watching Benjamin. Everyone was watching Benjamin. She crossed the distance in 12 seconds. 12 seconds of wheels on concrete, quiet against the ambient noise of the room invisible in the dim wing. She reached the booth. She reached across the table. The AV remote was smaller than she remembered from the spec sheet. Matte black rectangular, a single row of input slots along the base. She found the micro SD slot by touch. Her other hand was already at her throat. The locket opened the card between her thumb and forefinger. She slotted the card. The technician turned. Emily looked at him. She said nothing. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds steady, certain, the look of someone who belongs where they are and knows it comprehensively. And the technician, who was 23 years old and had been awake since 4 in the morning, made the calculation that most people make when confronted with absolute certainty in someone else's eyes. He looked back at the main screen. On stage, Benjamin was reaching the demonstration sequence. She could see him through the wing gap, the podium lights catching his tuxedo, the 50-foot screen behind him cycling through Genesis protocol specifications in clean white text on black. 500 people in the dark below him. The front row, visible from her angle, included a silver-haired man with a narrow notepad and the particular stillness of someone who was not here for the champagne. Dr. Sullivan, eyes forward, watching the biometric display in the lower right corner of the screen. Benjamin gestured toward the stage right platform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, measured deliberate building, the Genesis exoskeleton. The lights found the machine. 500 people exhaled in unison. It was beautiful. Emily knew it was beautiful. She had designed it to be beautiful because she had believed at 26 that things built to help people should also be made to move them. The titanium caught the light exactly as she had modeled it. The joints articulated in rest position exactly as she had engineered them. It was in every detail that mattered hers. The test pilot stepped forward. Young Fit selected for this moment. He reached for the suit's entry points. Emily pressed the remote's transfer key. The micro SD card had one file on it. The file was small. It was 15 years old. It was the original neural master key, her biometric signature in the root, the mirror check, at the base of the entire architecture patient, and permanent and specific, waiting for the one person it was designed to recognize. The exoskeleton status display flickered. The test pilot froze. The machine's entry locks disengaged from the pilot's hands with a sound that was soft and absolute, the sound of a system making a decision it was very certain about. The pilot stepped back. He did not fully understand what he was stepping back from. He stepped back anyway. The biometric display on the 50-foot screen changed. It had been showing the pilot's neural signature, a clean generic wave. It showed something else now. A signature older, denser, the particular complexity of a pattern that had been the architecture's native language since the day it was written. Text appeared below it, small and white and irrefutable. Original operator signal detected. Master key authentication confirmed. 500 people did not understand what they were reading. One person in the front row did. The machine moved. Not prompted, not remote controlled. It moved the way it had always been designed to move when it found what it was looking for. The way a compass needle moves when it finds north, definitive and without ceremony. The thud of it filled the ballroom. 1 step, 2, 3. The heavy mechanical certainty of titanium on marble. Thud, thud, thud in absolute dead silence. 500 people, motionless, Benjamin at his podium with his mouth open and no words coming out. It came down the center aisle. Emily had already moved from the wing. She was in the aisle. She sat in the scuffed manual wheelchair with her hands in her lap, still composed, the faded cardigan and the worn push rims and the battered locket open at her throat, and the machine that she had built at 26 came to her the way things returned to their origin, directly and without apology. The entry points found her. The locks engaged. She stood. Not quickly, not dramatically. The exoskeleton lifted her with the particular care of a system designed by someone who understood what it meant to need it, and she rose from the chair 6 feet tall in titanium, standing on marble in the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom in front of 500 silent people. She looked at Benjamin. He was pale. He was very still. His tuxedo, the one that had cost more than her annual salary, looked small suddenly. It looked like what it was. She said nothing. She did not need to. He had told her to stay down. He had been so certain she would stay down. He had built an empire on that certainty. and she had let him quietly, patiently in basements and coatrooms and dark corridors until the moment his own machine walked down his own aisle and told 500 witnesses and one federal auditor exactly whose name was in the root file. He had forgotten who built the legs. Benjamin found his voice first. That was characteristic of him. "It's a hack," he said, loud, sharp, aimed at the room rather than at her. "Someone has interfered with the demonstration. This is corporate sabotage." He turned to the nearest security guard with the automatic authority of a man who had always had security nearby. "Remove her. Remove her now." No one moved. Not the guards, not the staff, not the 500 people standing in the dark below the chandeliers with their champagne going warm in their hands. The room had the particular stillness of a collective holding its breath, 500 people who had come to witness a triumph and were now witnessing something they did not yet have language for, something that felt in its bones more significant. Dr. Sullivan rose from the front row. He did it quietly. No announcement, no gesture, the simple act of a man standing up in a room and taking up the space he was entitled to take. He was older than he looked in photographs, silver-haired and narrow, with the kind of stillness that came from decades of rooms where people lied to him professionally and he had learned to wait them out. He had a notepad. He did not consult it. He looked at the 50-foot screen behind Benjamin's head. Original operator signal detected. Master key authentication confirmed. Below that line in the neural log, the machine had been running since the micro SD card loaded the timestamp. 15 years, 4 months, 11 days. The original file creation date embedded in the root architecture, unalterable, the kind of metadata that existed below the level of user access, below the level of any modification a subsequent owner could make. Because Emily had built it that way, because she had understood at 26 that the most important thing about evidence was that it survive. "Mr. Hartwell," Dr. Sullivan said. His voice was not loud. It carried anyway. "I'd like you to step away from the podium." Benjamin's jaw set. "Sullivan, this is a staged disruption. My legal team will have documentation to you within the hour, proving that the Genesis Protocol is wholly owned Hartwell Group intellectual property developed internally over 7 years, and any claim to the contrary is..." "The biometric log," Dr. Sullivan said, patient precise, "is displaying a neural signature that predates your company's founding by 3 years. He looked at the screen. He looked at Emily. He looked at the timestamp. The file's root metadata shows an original creation date that corresponds to a period when, according to your own SEC filings, Vanguard Medical did not exist as a legal entity. He paused. "I've been watching this demonstration for 40 minutes, Mr. Hartwell. I watched it before tonight as well. I had questions then. I have fewer questions now."